We inspire greatness at track number 9. Stay on the right track and let your light shine. Step by step, reach for what's true. Track number 9, your greatness is waiting for you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to track number 9. Sister Cheryl on the other coast. Sister Cheryl said, get on board. Wow. My little cousin Mark Mars is here. I call this whole government. It's one of my special babies. Man, we got Gail Evans here this morning. Thank you guys for tuning in. My man Johnny Jones from Living Classrooms. Don't forget, guys, August they got an event coming up. We're going to be inviting brother on a show to talk about that First Monday empowerment. We got Miss Gwen. She calls me Senator Jacket. Brother Kareem is here, man. We're going to have a really interesting conversation this morning. And I know many of you, matter of fact, I know all of you personally. The many people that tune in, I just so happen to have a beautiful relationship with everybody. Charmaine Qualls is here. Good morning. And this topic is something that correlates to everything that's happening in Baltimore and across the country, to be honest with you. Last week, we had spoke a little bit about Project 2025, and I'm sure many of you have heard about it. Project 2025 is a 900-page policy agenda and transition blueprint that was created by the Heritage Foundation. Wow, Miss Bennett is here. I love to call her married name, Tasha Woodbury Bennett. Sister Roxanne Prettyman is here. I love calling her last name. She's recently married, and I'm just so happy for her and her husband. But we had talked about Project 2025 being a policy agenda and transition blueprint. Now, initially, Donald Trump tried to say, I don't know anything about it. What is Project 2025? But the Heritage Foundation had been working on this 900-page blueprint for quite some time. In fact, a few shows ago, I had mentioned this one lady. I forget her name, but she is one of the first Black women in 2018 that led the Heritage Foundation. And everything that we know about the Heritage, her name is Honorable K. Cole James. K. Coles James. Good morning. I see you, Sister Juanita Brown. Good morning. She invited me to that church service last week, and it was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, sister. I appreciate that. But this lady, and I always tell you, bring a pen. Her name is, let me look that up again one more time. Her name is K. Coles James. She is the first Black woman that led the Heritage Foundation. She worked in the Bush administration. She's obviously a conservative. She worked in the Bush administration and another one of the Republican elected presidents. She worked in their administration. But this Black woman, from what we can see, has helped to be the architect to get rid of equality for Black people and people of color. She is a part of helping this Trump administration and building up to that, because she was around in 2018. And what they do is they take and chip away at your rights slowly. They know it can't happen overnight, but they are very patient. It took them 50 years to get rid of Roe versus Wade. And that's a woman's right to choose. It took them 50 years, and they are patient. There's a saying that after the Civil War had ended, they said that the South will rise again. And the so-called Southern strategy has always been the blueprint to implement segregation. It's always been the blueprint to implement discrimination, racism, and pure hatred. The Southern strategy. And there was a saying, and they continue to say it, the South will rise again. Ever since the ending of slavery and the introduction of civil rights, Hey, good morning, my man Ronnie. Hey, Ronnie, good morning, Mr. Ronnie Smith. Good morning, brother. But ever since the ending of slavery, they have never let up. They have never given up on the idea that America is for white leadership, but particularly for white males. And for the past 400 or 500 years, while people are making progress, folks are slowly plotting on how can we get things back the way it was via circa 1863, 1864, which was just before the ending of slavery. But anyway, we're going to continue our conversation, and I encourage you guys to look up Project 2025. That 900, it's a lot of pages, and I had mentioned, shoot, by now they probably damn near at the end. They have already dismantled the federal government, which was largely African American folks. I think they said 350,000 Black women lost their jobs. They are already dismantling all of the agencies that were put in place to help protect American citizens, regardless of your race. One of them is the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice, at one time, when that little young Black boy was murdered recently, when he was with all his friends on that boat, the Department of Justice would have came in and would have done a thorough investigation. The feds would have came in. The same way with Trayvon Martin's case, the same with the sister down in Kentucky that was in her house and they had, shot and murdered her. But the Department of Justice was the entity that investigated like Emmett Till's murder and the murder of Medgar Evers. You know what I'm saying? But the Department of Justice has been dismantled and will no longer take an interest in things like that. And it's intentionally and it's on purpose. That's the Project 2025. But I don't want to go on and on and on because I want us to talk about how Project 2025, the federal government and funding affects local schools, affects the local school board. And today I have a wonderful guest that I met her in about 6 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, actually, at a community association meeting. And I was so taken by her. Every time I'm in the space with her, she has so much knowledge about subjects. She's a really, really smart lady and one that I want you guys to get to know when it comes to education, when it comes to what's going on in our schools, when it comes to the schools being the place that could help juvenile crime. The schools could be the space that could help get rid of juvenile crime. Okay, so without further delay, because I done talked about 20 minutes. Y'all know I can talk, honey. Give me a damn mic, camera, whatever. I'm going to talk. But anywho, please bring on our guest, Miss Ashley Esposito. She is currently on the school board here in Baltimore City, and she's running again for re-election for the school board. She has been our absolute best choice when it comes to being on Baltimore City School Board. Man, this lady knows a whole lot. Michelle Madden, say, "Hey, good morning, Monica, and distinguished guests." Yes, she is distinguished. Anywho, Ashley, I could go on and on and on, but I want you to introduce yourself to us and don't leave out nothing.
Okay.
Tell us all of the wonderful things that you have done. Share some things about you that our viewers would want to know and why it is that you are such an expert on education and some of the things that we need when it comes to our juveniles and when it comes to funding.
Yeah. So it's so fascinating because I'm not like I guess what you would say is a typical expert on education because my background is not in education at all. I'm not an
Mhm.
educator, not a former teacher, which is typically the types of people that serve on school boards or people that are in education policy. For me, it comes from a lot of lived experience. So I'm someone that had a really bad outcome in the education system, which started when I was
Mhm.
really, really small. At the time, I didn't know that I had several learning disabilities. And when they were raised in my education environment, I think, my mom, no fault to her, just, during that time period, a lot of people didn't know what like autism, ADHD, like all these things were. So to have your kid like potentially be labeled, there's like some discomfort there. But as a result, like we never formally got diagnosed or like got resources. So I didn't get diagnosed with learning disabilities until I was around 34, 35 years old. But I was also someone who in a time period in my when I was a kid, like I was in the foster care system, ended up aging out of foster care, going into an independent living program. And I mentioned those two things together because the kid that I was dealing with all those things is what I hear people talk about kids that like when they're talking about juvenile crime and like all these, like kids aren't inherently, into stuff, doing shenanigans. Like there's usually like a root cause. So a lot of my work when I did exit the independent living program, unfortunately, I did become unhoused and moved to Baltimore at that time to get a fresh start because I just needed to, I was not safe where I was at. So um, uh, once I got on my feet, a lot of my focus was on the school to prison pipeline because I saw, kids that I was in the group homes with or kids that, I knew during that time in the independent living program, like their outcomes were not good unless education was able to bring them out of it. I know a couple friends that had full scholarships to colleges and, their trajectory changed. But for a lot of us that were, dealing with so many other issues, like whether it was mental health, learning disabilities, or just economic issues, because not everybody could get into the independent living program. Their outcomes were really, really difficult. And I think all the time about where they are, I know some are incarcerated. So my purpose of serving on the school board is I didn't see anybody on our board that had that lived experience.
Mhm.
And I specifically wanted to serve to focus on foster care youth, unhoused youth, and students with disabilities. And when I got on there, I realized those groups, along with multilingual learners, are the kids that have the highest dropout rates and lowest graduation rates.
Mm.
And I think when you don't have someone that understands how policy misses kids, not intentionally, but just if it's not built around them or to support them, like they will fall through the cracks that they didn't create. So my policy education lens is solely from lived experience and also listening. So I really do try to seek out, students that are really struggling, or, I try to be a resource for parents that are like, this isn't working for us. And just as I listen to them and listen to their stories, I'm able to connect it with policy decisions.
I appreciate that. I'm trying to get back to my screen, this computer, and I switched computers so I wouldn't have those issues. Good morning, Miss Gwen Levi. But one of the things that you mentioned is something that I have an appreciation for, and it's not that the people who serve in our on our school boards and in the school systems, especially the people who make decisions, it's not that I am, feel like, oh, just because you have a degree in this, you have a degree in that, you've been a teacher for 30 years. I have an appreciation for that, but I have even more appreciation. Hey, my man from the Eastern Shore, hey, Jerome. But what I do have appreciation for is when we put people in positions with lived experience, like Sister Melinda Presley is here, but like the Department of Corrections, Secretary Scruggs, right? Secretary Scruggs have a lived experience committee, and her lived experience committee has people who are formerly incarcerated that's on this committee that's helping to shape programming and ideas and introduce ways to reduce the recidivism rate and to help reduce crime. Because to me, the person with the lived experience really gives you an angle that that you don't get. You can sit in school all day and have a doctorate degree in education, but you will never know what it is like to be a child in foster care trying to go to school. It's happening so often. And what's really troubling is that so many families now, at one time, you might see a older person that's homeless, or you might see a male that's homeless. Now it's the whole family. So now
Mhm.
you have all of these children who are in a foster care system and trying to still go to school. This child been sleeping on the street all night in a car, and they are still the next day they are inside of a school, and they can't stay awake. They sleep. Sometimes their clothes are soiled and dirty. Their hair is not done. Then they got to go through all of the changes with the students and then some of the teachers who unfortunately had gone to college, but they don't have the empathy for that child because they've never seen that before. They don't necessarily know how to deal with children in the foster care system or children that's unhoused. You know, I can't even imagine a child in a foster care system feeling like nobody loves me, nobody cares for me. Why would they give me away? They are children. They are 8, 9, and 10-year-old children trying to find out where's my mother, where's my father, why don't nobody love and care for me? And those different struggles, and yet they sitting in schools with other, and children can be cruel.
Mhm.
Children can be mean as hell. And it's a constant struggle. And if you don't have people in place at the school board that's willing to look at programming and options like yourself, all it is it just turns those children to the streets. They are hurt, they are mad, and they are angry, and they will take it out on the village. I think it was Fannie Lou Hamer that said, if the children don't feel welcome in the village or feel loved by the village, they're gonna burn it down. And that's the
Yeah.
truth. The children, they don't understand that misplaced anger and hurt. I was one of them. I know.
Yeah.
I was mad. I was mad at the whole world. You couldn't say. I was going to say shit, girl. You know I love to cuss. I love to cuss. I ain't even gonna lie. But
Oh
at
no,
one
that
time,
was
I was so mean and ornery. My mother used to say, "Why are you so mean and ornery?" Because I didn't have the life that I felt that I deserve. Right. So I know what it is. Go
yeah,
ahead,
and
sis.
that was definitely me. Like I was a kid that fought. I spent most of my high school time, especially my second high school, in school suspension. Um, yeah, just because I couldn't articulate. Like I also dealt with something called selective mutism, which I would go like long periods of time without speak. I could speak, but it's almost like really crippling social anxiety, and the way that that would like bubble up as I would rage.
So you say you would go
And
a long time or a period of time without saying anything?
right, right. So there's
Oh,
people that I graduated high school with that see what I'm doing now, and they're kind of like, I didn't even know you could talk, like for real.
well, praise God, you
But
got your voice. Amen.
yeah, and I think the thing that's frustrating about me, it's like two things. One, we're expecting kids to articulate their needs and be their best advocates when they're children.
Mm,
Like that's insane. Like
mm,
to have a kid going through a whole bunch of stuff and then have them saying, "Oh, all these resources exist. You just have to tap into them."
mm,
They're children.
mm,
And I mean, without like in my experience, without like a court appointed special advocate, my case manager, all these services that I got in the foster care system, it kind of made me more angry because they're also the same resources that if my family would have gotten them, like you get all these wraparound services when you get pulled into the system
mm,
and access to stuff, but they're the same things that would have prevented you from going into foster care in the first place had you received them years prior, right? And so like when we're talking about even foster care, like that in itself is a flawed system. We need to be talking about foster care prevention, one, and
mm,
then two, um showing families some grace, because there's also a lot of kids that are not in the foster care system, but they're kids that I call like off the grid, which I was for a period of time where, you got a single mom and who's working, and you don't necessarily like have the village to support, or it's not safe to even like request help from a village because you don't know if that neighbor is going to end up reporting you or saying that you're neglecting your kids, but it's the
mm.
reality of your economic situation. So yeah, I think there's a lot of system things like outside of the school system that we need to strengthen. We need to have real conversations about how we support families and make it safe for them to seek support without being punitive or like snatching their kids. Um, because the foster care system isn't any better. It's not like, even recent reports that we had here, like there's situations where people don't know where every kid is. And, case managers, from my experience, their caseloads were absolutely insane. And the amount of work that we were asking them to do was unreasonable. Like, I mean, state employees, for the amount that they get paid, for the caseloads that they manage, and what the responsibility is, it's just a lot. And then we ask teachers to fill the gaps in where all the other systems have broken down. And with education funding being what it is, yes, we should be supporting and like really leaning into community schools, but the amount of money that would actually take to expand and like fully support all families, yeah, like in the moment that we're in now, where different systems in education are getting defunded, like I'm really concerned about what the community school model will even look like.
Yes, ma'am. That's another thing I wanted to make sure that we covered is the actual funding that schools are getting. And I know I had mentioned that Linda McMahon. She comes from the wrestling mega family. She is McMahon, the guy who not discovered wrestling, but had been in the wrestling industry. Let me first say that we watch wrestling every Saturday with our bologna and cheese sandwiches and milk. Every single Saturday we watched it. So I know how big wrestling have been, especially in Baltimore, for a long time. And I know that this family that she comes from is filthy rich when it comes to the creation and the growth of WWE and just wrestling, period. And they put her in charge of the Department of Education. And many people, according to what they put in 2025, this is what their goal is. The goal they claim, or what I have researched, is that they want to mainstream it, and they want to downsize some of the spending, and they want to save taxpayer dollars, the usual hoopla. But what I see is that they really want to dismantle the Department of Education, period. And if the Department of Education goes, it gets to be even more difficult to get federal dollars to trickle down to the state of Maryland, so that the state of Maryland can hand out that money to the State Board of Education, and the State Board of Education can dole it out. We have 24 counties, jurisdictions that include Baltimore City. Now, let me tell you what the Department of Education, it was originally created by Jimmy Carter, the peanut guy, one of the best presidents I think we have ever had. He was such a good, decent, genuine man. Jimmy Carter was freaking amazing. So in 1979, Jimmy Carter elevated the Department of Education, to a cabinet level position so that the president can select that person. He wanted to fulfill a campaign promise to the teachers union and better coordinate scattered federal education programs. President Carter signed the Department of Education Organization Act into law on October 17th, 1979. And let me tell you what their goals were. The goals were equal access. Remember, we had to go through the Board of Education, Brown versus the Board of Education, just so that Black schools can get equal money, equal funding, books, computers, decent schools, not schools with water that's contaminated, not schools that have bathrooms that's not working, no AC, no heat. That wasn't the objective or goal of creating the Department of Education. Equal access, which ensures equal education opportunities for all students, regardless of race, sex, or background. And trust me, oh man, we had Sister Olinda on here. Man, she says they have dismantled education by defunding the Department of Education. Yes, indeed. That's another sister. I hope I could get Sister Olinda on here. She is one of, man, I know some really smart people, and she's one of them. Hi, Miss LaKenda Camper. I do comments. I take care of a lot of off the grid kids. They were in the system and turned 18 and preferred homelessness in my neighborhood to the next step in an unknown place with no support. She says she watches the system and she support them. They have aged out and now they homeless, but she's looking after them. But I was saying that, their main goal is to kill that equal access. The Department of Education was created so that all students, regardless of race, sex, or background, can have equal access to education. And they have done a doozy with defunding it. She has no clue. They had this lady in the interview. They asked her a question. She says, "Well, I don't even know that," and proud of it. But anywho, that is how our schools get our funding. The federal government has these programs and they end up, sending money to us. Sister Juanita said, "Is there anything that the outsider can do to help out in the communities like fundraising, clothes, giveaways?" She says, "Yes, Jimmy Carter had something to do with Habitat for Humanity, housing, and everything." And that is true. I know on track number 9, we would hope that people who want to give clothes away, who want to help these kids, would connect with people like LaKinda and would connect with our sister, Ashley Esposito. She's actually running for re-election. So she will need your support to make sure. Oh my goodness, Crystal Park is here.
Yeah,
Good morning.
I love Christmas.
Yay. I know, right? But that's one of the reasons why we have people here, so that we can put the tracks together, if you will, and make the connections so that
Yeah.
people can.
And yeah, and
That's,
there's one.
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to chime in on the funding piece, because one of the things I know, there's a lot of news stories where like Baltimore City gets trolled and they're like, "You all have 1 point whatever billion dollars in the budget." First of all, we have a $400 million funding gap for our buildings year after year. We had some of the oldest infrastructure in the state. So when you're talking about the funding, it doesn't, I get so frustrated with some news places that say per pupil, as if that funding follows the each student into the classroom. Because first of all, it takes a lot more money to support our students with disabilities, our multilingual learners, our foster care youth, our unhoused youth, like those 4 populations. So it is not just equal to that, but also there's all that infrastructure, like managing all these different schools. When you talk about BGE rate hikes, like that also impacts them. There's no like discount. Like there might be a slight discount or something, but it is expensive. And in my day job, I'm the executive director of Baltimore Unity Hall. Like annually, I know our energy bill is, well, I mean, this is before the rate hikes. It was like $54,000 a year. So imagine that for all the schools, plus preventative maintenance, plus HVAC. I know we got trolled for a long time about not having HVAC in some schools, but before you install the HVAC, you need to upgrade the electricity so you don't blow out the power in the whole building. So those are 2 things. And then I also want people to actively push back if they hear anybody say that I want a return on investment as a taxpayer. Because first of all, we're talking about kids. These are not commodities. This is not like going and buying a soda. And then when we're talking about kids with disabilities, that return on investment is so harmful. Like my kiddo was just diagnosed with autism. And as I said, I'm a member of the disability community. That return on investment that is why we have teachers, we have systems that want to focus on the kids that are able to achieve at the rate that is expected when we're looking at, MCAP scores and having expectations that kids perform, that every single kid in school will perform well and be an excellent test taker. Like that's kind of what we're asking. When we know for a fact that there's some kids that will never be great test takers. In my case, my literacy was in the trash. I graduated from high school with a 1.4 cumulative GPA for all 4 years. So I was not on grade level at all by any means, but I was an excellent test taker. So what that told people is that I wasn't applying myself, or I wasn't trying hard enough, not understanding that I could barely read. So yeah, I just really challenge folks to, one, advocate for students with disabilities, because that is not fair to say you have to be at the same rate or else you do not deserve funding, or you do not deserve the time and care that it takes to have you reach your best potential. And then 2, like we cannot do a one size fits all package for education. We cannot say that every kid learns the same, or that this amount of money is what gets a kid from kindergarten to graduation. So yeah, I'm happy. I could go on a whole rant about the per pupil funding, what it actually takes for kids to, you know, to thrive, and also just to feel good in education spaces. I can tell you from my experience, and I'm seeing it a little bit with my kiddo now that he's like, it's literacy time. So some kids are struggling, and you're starting to see like what kids are able to adapt to this model. But that third grade cliff, when it really becomes apparent that kids are going to fall behind, that's devastating mental health wise. I remember what that felt like. And I remember going every single year to school after that point saying, this is the year I'm going to try really hard. I'm going to try and figure out why it didn't work last year, and make sure that I keep up on my work. And then I would fall behind again. And I put that on myself, not understanding that like the way that education is taught did not work for the way that my brain works. So even though I had struggles in high school, simultaneously, like I knew 6 different programming languages, so computer programming. So I had brilliance in one area, but just the way that we do a one size fits all, there was no opportunity for me to thrive.
Okay, we had a question from one of our viewers. Miss Michelle Madison said, do you find disparities amongst children of color in dealing with these issues regarding disabilities?
You know what I see, and I'm going to be really, really blunt. I think a lot of it is the way that we talk about disabilities in our community, in the Black community. I think that even when I talk about being a member of the disability community, the number of times that I get pulled up and saying, hey, don't talk about yourself like that, don't accept that label, that is actually like really harmful, because one, it is important for there to be representation of people that have disabilities from our community as advocates. But also that means that you want me to hide that because it makes other people uncomfortable. And as a result, I don't get the resources that I need, or I'm not interacting with people to have them understand that my brain works different, my abilities are different, whether that's, more visible disabilities or invisible disabilities. I think that we have a lot of discomfort because disabilities also have been used to harm us. So like, the over-identification of learning disabilities when it's actually something else, when it's actually trauma. So I do think that we need to like have more people in the disability justice space that represent our communities. But also I think that, just as like a fam, not for the public conversation, like in our own families, we need to talk about and be more acknowledge differences. I'm starting to see it more now. I'm starting to see a lot of mamas in my community that are like, oh yeah, my kiddo has autism, and we're connecting, shared lived experiences and identities, which is helpful, because I do think that there's over-representation of other groups that are, without our representation, they are identifying what autism looks like and what advocacy looks like. And so I do think that we need to hold space and to be present. And part of the reason why I am so public about being a member of the disability community, because I want kids who have the same challenges not to think that they have to find someone to advocate for them. I want to tell them, no, you snatch the highest seat where the power resides, and you advocate for yourself and your community. You don't need somebody to do it for you. Because when I ran the first time, people were like, oh, you're going to really struggle. It's a lot of reading. Like I still struggle with literacy, and I use a screen reader and a bunch of accessibility tools now that I know how my brain works. And I think that representation is really, really important, because otherwise you don't think that you belong, and you don't believe that you belong as a leader.
Okay, I appreciate that. I wanted to say thank you, Moj, for being here this morning. And Moj says, I appreciate the platform. It is my pleasure. I'm one that loves to serve. So if I can get up at 9 o'clock in the morning every single Saturday and be here with y'all, I'm happy. Plus, I love you guys. So I'm willing to do it out of love. Even if 2 of y'all show up, guess what? I'm going to be here. If one show up. What's on Elijah Muhammad said, I would teach 2 to chairs. Amen. Because once you put the word out there, it's going to travel. God will make the word do the supposed to do. And I always like to reflect on our Lord and Savior. One, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. So when that Word travel, God is going to make it do what it's supposed to do. You put it out in the universe, and God is going to make that Word manifest the way it's supposed to. Okay. So I'm gonna be here because I love y'all again. But one thing I wanted to go back to is that one, when we talk about the HVAC in schools, I had heard, now I haven't researched it myself, that it was Peter Franchot, our former comptroller, who elected not to get all of the HVAC systems in the city fixed when he had a chance. Good morning, Michelle. Michelle Johnson, good morning. But there was a vote that had taken place in Annapolis, Maryland, some years ago. And the vote was to see if the Baltimore City schools and the school system, period, but I know in Baltimore, could get the HVAC systems fixed in all of the schools. And Peter Franchot said no. And what he did was he said, we will put air conditioners in the schools. So as you walk to different schools, whether it's Highland Park, well, I call it Highland Park. I forget the name of it now. Booker T, I still call those the schools I went to. I forget the names now. But when you look, you'll see they have air conditioners in those windows. And that is no way to cool those schools off, especially with climate change and the heat that we have now. Shucks, girl. I put little shoes on my dog feet before they burn their paws. The ground be so hot. I gotta put little booties on them. They be walking all crazy. But sometimes I gotta put stuff on their feet because it's so hot. But it was supposedly Peter Franchot who stopped the HVAC system from being put in the systems. And that came back up because he was running for governor. And that was one of the things that came back up and kind of resurfaced. You know, because when you got political leaders, you have to follow their decision making and what they do, and whether or not they will be an effective leader for you. You know what I mean?
And I do not. Yeah, and as an elected official, I do not agree with that strategy. Like, it irks me so bad when people are like, "Help me get elected, and then I'll do the thing."
Yeah.
Like, that has never been like my orientation for like how I lead at all. Like, I literally, when I got elected to the school board, I wasn't even thinking past school board, past my term, nothing like that. Like, I was like, oh, okay, like I'm ready to work. But I said, I have 48 months to do as much as I can with the kids that I want to focus on. So I'm going ham for 48 months. So for somebody, for there to be an opportunity to like fix something, like I don't like, you cannot attach that to a re-election or election to a higher seat. Like, that is just harmful to constituents. And there's no guarantee that you'll even get elected. So what, you could just going to leave like the funding or the opportunity on the table, and then they got to try to negotiate with the next person? Like, that's crazy. Yeah. And disappointing. Like, just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Amen.
Period.
Yeah. Amen. I agree. The other thing you had mentioned is that Baltimore City Schools each year has a $400 million funding gap. I can remember and some black folks was go ahead.
For the infrastructure. That's specifically
yeah. So for capital projects, because I know that I have read that to build one new school, the minimum amount to pay for a brand new school is $100 million, and that's on the low side.
Right.
$100 million for one school. And what I've also known is, like you said, that there's a funding gap every year. But we had like Larry Hogan was our governor here in Maryland for 2 electoral cycles. And one of the things he kept saying, and then you have black folks repeating it, we're not giving Baltimore City any more money. We give them such and such amount of money, and all that stuff is a lie, because you know that little bit of change that you provide to Baltimore City will never make a dent or impact. But because people listen to clips and sound bites and they repeat it, they repeat it to say, hey, good morning, Kia Simpson. But they repeat it to say, Baltimore's getting all this money. What are they doing with the money? Shit, shucks. You get 10 cents, but you really need $2. And that's almost, unfortunately, like some of our households. I've seen families become homeless because they really just could not pay their bills. Working people. Right now, you have people who are homeless who go to work every day. They're not lazy. They just cannot get the amount of money they need for this high rent that we are experiencing. I want to give a shout out to my man Dorian Maddox too. He's also here. But the funding piece, that's the one that I think, you know, the listening audience should kind of keep in mind, because it gets so important. I was thinking before we came on today, and I was thinking when it comes to our babies, when it comes to our children, the first name on their lips is mommy. The second name on their lips is Miss Anderson or Mr. Johnson or Miss Crutchfield, because our children spend so much time with these people. Besides their mama, the first person that they know, my second grade, my third grade teacher was Miss Barbara Anderson. She's still alive and she lives on Ockentrawley Terrace across from Druid Hill Park. She is an amazing person. We had this one teacher at 28 Elementary School. We called her Killer Carter. She would tear our ass up. Excuse my French. Because back then, you know what I'm saying, they could take a yardstick and whack you 2 or 3 times. Killer Carter didn't play. She was a math teacher overall, but she had like the 5th grade. We were scared to death of her. We ain't play. When we did our homework and we got in our class, we called her Killer Carter. She would take 2 or 3 yardsticks and put tape around them, and you show off, and she would whack your little hide. Yeah, girl. That it worked. Shit, Leroy Peters was bad as I don't know what. It got him in line. He was bad. Oh, Leroy Peters was bad. Everybody from Sandtown know him too. Oh, Leroy was a bad little boy. He lived on Carrollton Avenue. But anyway, I think that the funding that goes to the schools, folks need to understand that it is always back to the polls. Who do we elect to be in place? Are we going to elect people that's going to claim, well, we gave them this amount of money, they know it's not enough money? Or are we going to have people like you, like yourself, that understand that this is what we need? Because we have this so-called juvenile problem in Baltimore and throughout the country. We just had, Ms. Gwen said that we had truant officers too. We did have truant officers.
Can I add something on that?
Sure.
Like, because we put so much responsibility on the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we point the fingers at the kids and we're like, you're not doing this. We need to arrest them. We need truancy officers, all that. But we are not doing our part. Like, it goes back to that village part that other folks were talking about. Like, if we know the kids, right, in the community. So if they're not going to school, and also you have 1 or 2 times for a kid to tell you what's going on with them and to do something about it before you lose them. Because I've seen so many times where kids honestly say, you know, I'm not able to go to school because X, Y, and Z. And then they're failed by an adult, or an adult's too uncomfortable. Like, oh, that's too much. Like, they unleash something that's like really, really heavy. And then the adult's back into the bushes and they want somebody else to deal with them. But we're all like a few degrees separated from all these kids. If we all stepped up, we want somebody to come out and like save us and like deal with the kids. The kids are pissed. First of all, to your point about climate change, they're looking at a whole world that they're about to inherit that they didn't create. They're seeing their parents have housing insecurity, job insecurities. And so, but we're telling them that going to school is a pathway when it hasn't been a pathway for their parents. So this generation of kids, and because I like talk to them so much and I actually like listen, things do not look bright. And I think there's also a generational disconnect. The experience that my mom had, my grandmother had, or whoever, and the opportunities that existed then do not exist now. So I feel like they do have every right to be angry, but I think that adults really, really, really need to listen and do some like self-reflection about what are you doing? Like, I love the example of someone that stepped up in the comments and said, how can I support? How can I, donate? Like, that's what we need. We can't just be like, I'm worrying about my kid and you worry about yours. when we know that other kids in our communities are struggling. Like I could have done the same. You know, my kiddo is growing up way different than I grew up, but I recognized that he was going to be in classrooms with kids that had the same experiences that I had. So I can't just focus on my kid because his
Mm,
best friend could be going through the same thing that I went through when I was a young kid and found like a friend that you know, my one friend's mom really supported me and my sisters, like signed us up for stuff, you know, like really it was just amazing. But we need to get back to that. We can't just turn a blind eye and be like, oh, those kids over there when they live on our block. And
mm,
we also can't lock them up because that in itself is traumatic. As somebody, you know, as a young person that had interactions with police a lot, um, you have to like heal from that. So you can't just keep throwing like not throwing solutions at kids and expecting them to like be the adults. Once again, you can't put the responsibility on the kids, and also for kids that don't have parents, which is the case sometimes, or active
mm.
parents. What is, as a community, what are we going to do for situations like that? Because without acknowledging it, with turning a blind eye to it, like we're setting that kid on the path to be incarcerated.
Yeah. Well, I know that we had a really great example in a sister named Tia that runs an urban book reads store over East
Yep.
Baltimore. And one of the things that she did was she had, they caught the little boy, he was like 20, 22, 23 years old, that broke into her store. And when she went to court, that thing be moving me, man. Sometimes I
Mhm.
will cry. But the thing make me so emotional, man. She had went to court and she had asked the judge if he could turn the young man over to her because she had found out from his uncle. The uncle was like, "Man, you know that's my nephew," because they put things out. Anybody know this guy? Anybody know this cat? The uncle came to her and said, "That's my nephew. He just lost his mother. So and so died. He just been going through a hard time, like really challenging. You know what I mean?" And Tia told the judge to give him to me. Don't lock him up because that's not going to help.
No.
And he had been, phew, he been doing really good.
Right. Like that's
He's been doing well because, like I said, she said that arresting him, especially because the young man was just going through a lot. And I think she said that she gave an update that the young man got a job now, and that he's doing really good. You know what I'm saying? So I got my hat goes off to her, and I just see some of this stuff that's happening in our communities is just, especially when it comes to school and education and our children being out here in the streets rather than being in school, is so many other things that are correlated with their behavior. It's
yeah.
hard when you got, a mother that's on drugs, a father that's on drugs, father been killed, your mother in jail, your grandmother is 70 years old and she's trying to take care of this child, and the baby is hurt. The baby is hurt, and then you look at a world that's saying that your life don't mean nothing to me. When you got children that constantly see a Freddie Gray being murdered, you constantly see, young black men just being shot, shooting each other. It just kind of do something like my life ain't really worth nothing anyway. I
Right.
had a cousin that used to tell my sister, share my sister, that he didn't think that he would live past 16 years old. And she would say, why? All that stuff that he think that you think about. He was in school and they gave him, when you got kids that do IEPs and that need special attention and whatnot, they give you all kinds of psychological tests. They
Mhm.
they showed they did a test with him, and they was just showing him pictures and say, "Hey, describe to me what you see." They had given him a piece of paper that had a violin case, and they asked him, "Hey, what is it that you see, and what do you think about?" He said, "A gun." This is a violin case, and depending upon what community you come from, you would say a violin, or you think about classical music. but that's not his introduction. That's not what he think. He think about a Tommy gun or a gun hidden inside of a violin case or something, because that's where he come from. And what I see happening is the system failed the children by not seeing that this is where this person come from. This is his background. This is how he was brought up, so he can see different things. One kid might see a violin case and think classical music, and the other kid is going to see a gun, a weapon, or whatever. And it don't mean that these kids don't deserve the same thing. They'll walk away and say, "Oh, this child needs medication. Give him some Ritalin," because they done ran all of these tests. But even the way that they treat our children in the system is flawed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just
And,
wanted
and
to
I,
bring that up as we consider the school being a place that can really help with juvenile crime. A
right.
school can really be the place to help to turn our children around and help give them a brighter future.
And I would like not push back, but add some context because first of all, most incarcerated people, I think the last stat I saw was like 40% of people that are in the criminal justice system either have diagnosed or undiagnosed disabilities, especially
Mm,
like learning disabilities, right? So even when you're talking about like riddle, like I'm someone who takes medication for ADHD,
mhm.
and that would have been life changing to me when I was younger. Life changing. Like, I mean, I could put together a whole list of how different my life would have been because of what it resolves. And I know people are like, you know, we'll push back on a diagnosis. Like it goes back to my point earlier. Like we'll push back on a diagnosis, push back on medication, but that in itself, like if it is a valid diagnosis, and if there's like also you got to look at the family tree because I'm starting to notice like, oh yeah, this was inherited for sure. This is not like something that happened to me on a whim. Like this is from my family line, and it also makes me show my family grace because I'm like, had we had these diagnoses and access to resources, you know, our whole family would look different, right? Like we wouldn't have all these fractures and stuff. But I do think the one thing that we can do, both talking more about mental health, talking more about like disabilities, but the biggest thing, kind of connecting to what someone just commented about with Project 2025, we have to talk about the media because the way that we have internalized some of these narratives, I have seen people that I love as aunties in the community regurgitate some things that they heard on Fox or that they heard on right wing media. Um,
Mm,
which is alarming. I personally, like as a school board member, boycotted participating in Fox 45's coverage of the school board race because I heard from students how much that narrative is harmful to them. There are several that said the only time I ever see that guy with a microphone is if something bad happens or if somebody in our community gets hurt. But anytime we have anything positive, we don't hear from them. They are not trying to like they want to like show us as like bad kids that people should be fearful of. And then also the way that that is a coordinated effort across the country and in relation to Project 2025. So Fox News, Sinclair, they have a coordinated communication broadly to dismantle. They are in alignment with dismantling public education. They are talking about vouchers. They are making us distrust our own school system and just be adversarial when we could be working together and putting that wedge there so that we are in favor of defunding our own best interests. So I'm participating in a forum on August 1st at the Real News Network at 11 o'clock with some folks from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. And we're talking specifically about unmasking Sinclair's propaganda machine, because that right there, like that is a big part of like our, the way that we've looked at our young people. Like that constant churn of like talking about them as if they're something to be afraid of, that they're terrorists, that they're the adultification of our kids has been really disgusting for me because we cannot look at our kids and be like, once again, tell them to your point, like the kid that experienced all those things, like to ask, I'm actually proud that the minimum that he did in that moment of grief was just like breaking somewhere. Like that's a lot to deal with for a kid. And imagine if that's compounded with like other traumatic events.
Mm.
Um, so there's an opportunity to come out of it, but we cannot hold our kids to a higher standard than we do adults. That just sounds so backwards to me. And I remember what it felt like to be 15 and angry and frustrated and having seeing my future, like when I graduated, and seeing like this is going to be terrible, and I don't have any positive outlook on the future, and to let that manifest in just me like being ragey, or withdrawn. So I want people to take a step back when we're talking, especially when we're talking about teenagers. They are teenagers. Like they are not adults able to fully articulate what's going on. But also, like I said, if they do come to you and tell you what's wrong, you have one shot to really listen and do something about it.
Yes, ma'am. Well, let me Keith Baxter had mentioned that we need more programs like the racquetball program that Leon Thomas runs. He's actually one of the producers on the show. And yes, Keith mentioned that one of his students that he coached in his program is actually the engineer and executive producer on this show as well. Al God Karan. He's a wonderful young kid. Wonderful. And that is definitely how we do it. We get our children involved, we give them skills, and we give them outlets and things to do. For this young brother to be almost, I mean, he can beat midi pros in racquetball. And for him to be able to gain these skills of being able to produce track number 9 and be an engineer on this show, that's how we ensure that they have a bright future. And we also had somebody in the comments, Kashia, yep, the Crips love playing racquetball. We end up getting ourselves a heckler here. I love it. Come on. If you got time to come here and talk all that foolishness, we want to have it because we need viewership. Matter of fact, bring all the rest of the people with the foolishness, Kashia or whoever you are. Bring them all. Every Klansman that you can think about, invite them to the show. Every white supremacist you can think about, invite them to the show. They just might learn something. I'm not going to tell them to get rid of you. I want you to come. I want you to hear it. Anywho, besides that person, I wanted to also mention one of the things that sister was saying is like voting with identity politics and stuff like that. Like people really have to vet the people that they vote for so that we can get these things that we need, that we know we need, that's going to be effective, and not have some politicians say, oh, we've given Baltimore X amount of dollars, knowing that that's not enough money. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is Sister Sarah said, like a lot of the parents have failed their children, and the communities that we used to have was one that when a family member had issues with drugs, a aunt would take the children and raise them, a grandmother would take the children and raise them, right? So those parents did fail. Well, I won't say they failed. They did the best that they could. But we just have to step up more and not be scared of our children, because the brothers at We Our Us, the brothers at these churches, these synagogues, these mosques that has come together on one accord to help our young people out in these streets, they are very successful. They gain their trust. They put them in programming, and they are very, very successful. So I know it can be done. I know that I've seen Akil Parker. Akil Parker was a guest on this show, and he does all this math, and he is absolutely amazing when he take young people and he take history and he put math and history together. It's amazing. It's actually for adults as well, because I need to
Oh
be there. Oh my
shit.
goodness, Ashira. Oh my goodness, Ashira Park is here. Hi,
Yeah.
Ashira. I'm so happy to see you. But we can do that at Unity Hall. Start hosting some things and start bringing people together. But it's your time. Your time is the treasure, because sometimes we don't always need money. In 1868, when slavery had just ended, them people didn't have no money. They barely had damn land to live on. In 1898, them folks didn't have no money like that. Shit, in 1975, they wasn't had no money like that. It's just of late that we managed to get a few people that see success. And unfortunately, sometimes they forget, because previously the success of one meant the success of the entire community. But people like Floyd Mayweather, who I don't mind calling out, Floyd Mayweather's got to be one of the most selfish people in the world. I actually watched Floyd Mayweather take hundreds of thousands of dollars and burn it and set it on fire just so he could demonstrate how much money he had. And when people say, man, you could have taken that money, could have helped out the Boys and Girls Club, he says stuff like, it's my money, I made it, it's for me or whatever, you know. And they got theirs to get. But that wasn't how it used to be. Our money, time, and talent was for the whole community. So as we sign off, and I hope you learned something from what we mentioned today. Look up that project. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, like, because you mentioned recovery specifically, I think what I would also like to challenge the community to have discussions about is harm reduction. You know, as someone who has recovered, you know, my husband's in recovery, like, we do recover, first of all. Second of all, I think having, like, destigmatizing, like, having those conversations, because we can't just, write people off and say, oh, that's the problem over there, or separate the kids from the problem, because best case scenario is the parents do recover. But in this city, as someone who has driven around the city looking for resources for, you know, some extended family members and trying to find quality treatment, I can tell you we ended up having to go to other counties because we do not do dual diagnosis treatment access well in Baltimore City. So I just, if you want something to advocate for, specifically to help families get through that process, we need, you know, like Colmac is one that I can think of that's in the county that has helped people really recover, but we deserve in this city to have access to the same.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank Michelle Rodwell for being here, my good friend Shantae Perry. Shantae Perry, I know she loved this conversation today because she worked with young people that have, you know, challenges and whatnot, and she absolutely loved the patients, well, the individuals that she worked with. She's a beautiful person. So I know she got a lot out of this conversation. I hope you bought a pen. I want you to look up that lady I told you about, Kay Coles, the first Black lady that's running the Heritage Foundation. I want you guys to look up Project 2025. Check it out. And we're going to continue to try to figure out a way forward for all people, Black, white, brown, straight, gay, Republican, Democrat, conservative, because that's what this country is about. This country is supposed to be the land of the free, the home of the brave, and it's supposed to be equal rights and equal protection under law for everybody. So we're going to keep praying on that. We're going to keep moving forward. I'm going to wipe my eyes. I shed a little bit of tears this morning, but when I was thinking about that little boy, man, that thing got to me.
Yeah.
Sister said, call Dr. Grady, somebody, but I couldn't. Call Dr. Grady Dale. Okay, we'll call Dr. Grady Dale. And I love you guys. Even the heckler that came on here asking, do we love Crips and all that? We love that idiot too. And I hope that idiot come back, because I got more for you and your Klansmen buddies. Anyway, I love you all. Dear Ashley, I appreciate you so much for insight, determination, understanding, and love of the precious children in our community. You're so needed. That's our friend, Sister Cheryl Ward from the other coast. We call it the West Coast. She tunes in from the West, from Los Angeles, California. I love her dearly. She's a beautiful sister. And I love y'all. And thank you. Have a good day. Thank you, Ashley. Ashia Parker showed up, man. Everybody was here. I love you guys. Have a good day.
We inspire greatness at track number 9. Stay on the right track and let your light shine. Stay step by step, reach for what's true. Track number 9, your greatness is waiting for you.